Welcome to one of our short chats from 𝗕𝗳𝗲 and Andrew of Governance and Legal, talking about the importance of governance in the not-for-profit and charity sector. 𝗕𝗲𝗲 and Andrew have been working together for almost 20 years now, and both are qualified lawyers, specialising in governance for this sector, advising 50 organisations on their governance. Welcome back to our conversation. This is part 2 of our board effectiveness talk. Again, we're going to be talking to 𝗕𝗲𝗲. 𝗕𝗲𝗲, what did we do in part 1? Quick synopsis.
So yes, in part 1, we talked about board effectiveness and why it's important. And we also talked about the value of the board self-evaluating or externally evaluating its effectiveness and reflecting on basically how they're doing as a board, how good of a job they are performing for the organization.
And if you want to hear the full part of that part 1 of the chat, just go to the Governance and Legal page on LinkedIn and follow the page and you'll see it all on there. So, thinking about what we talked about in part 1, what are the specialist questions which need to be answered in a board effectiveness review?
Yeah, so there are requirements which are set by the codes. Because of that, they must be present at an effectiveness review. So these are, for example, the composition of the board, the skills of board members or trustees, their experience and knowledge, the board's diversity in its widest sense, and how the board works together. But in addition, there are specific requirements set by the NHF Code of Governance, which should be addressed in an effectiveness review. So, for example, the effectiveness of the board in role modeling the desired culture, values, and behaviors in the organization. A lot of housing associations are grappling with this issue at the moment as to, how to achieve this, how to measure the culture of an organization, and how do they know that the desired culture is now being implemented. There's also an emphasis on governing instruments, delegated authorities, standing orders, and other formal documentation. There's also questions need to be asked about the timing and frequency of meetings and format of agendas, and how the views of stakeholders are being reflected in the board's decision-making, which is also a huge topic in the housing sector at the moment, particularly when it comes to the views of their customers or tenants. So when we carry out an external review of board effectiveness, we drill deeper and we look to gain some more understanding of the board's performance in relation to, for example, organizational purpose and strategy. We'll look at delivery of value to stakeholders, whether they're tenants or service users, beneficiaries or their families. We also always look at financial viability and planning, so the robustness of financial controls. We also always drill into risk management, so whether the board understands its top strategic risks for the organization and whether it's got a clear understanding of its risk appetite and tolerance. We also look at leadership and accountability. We try to understand whether the board works as an effective team within the board itself, but also with the executive team. And another important point, which should be addressed as part of an effectiveness review, is the behaviours around the table and the quality of the chairing.
You've mentioned skills several times. What are the skills that the board members or trustees should have, and who decides what they are?
The answer, as most things related to governance, is that it depends. And it depends on the organization and more particularly on its purpose and strategy. You would expect that there are some skills which will be needed by most charities and housing associations. For example, financial, legal, regulation and compliance, health and safety, risk management, data and cybersecurity, human resource and organizational development, operational skills, which are linked to the sector in which the organization works, asset management for housing association, for example. The NHF code requires that people with direct lived experience are meaningfully engaged in the governance structure of the housing association. Whilst there is no specific requirement that such people should sit on the board of a housing association, a lot of our clients have elected board members from the communities that they serve, and they have done a really good job out of it. Others find it challenging because it's a tough criteria to satisfy in a meaningful way. The skills that are needed for the effective operation on the board will, of course, change over time as the organization evolves and perhaps moves into new areas of business, or perhaps if it withdraws from certain areas of their business. For example, a charity which intends to start fundraising and will rely on that activity to bring in substantial contribution to the budget will probably need someone with fundraising experience on their board going forward, where they did not need that before they started fundraising.
And we see that skills requirements will also change as the external environment changes. Most boards nowadays are looking for members with data and perhaps cybersecurity skills, where this was not necessarily the case 15 years ago. Some boards have now started looking at the utilization of AI, and therefore they will perhaps look to bring such skills onto their boards.
Yes, and that's why we encourage our clients to formally agree the skills they require on the board and complete a skills review of their board members or trustees regularly, usually once a year, just so to see whether there are any skill gaps that may exist. And then this informs the board's recruitment plans. So we usually recommend that a skill matrix is developed and reviewed regularly by the board, or usually by a committee whose role it is to do this, for example, a Rem-Nom committee or governance committee or similar.
Thank you very much to Jana and Andrew for their knowledge and insight into board effectiveness. This is part 2 of the Board Effectiveness Talk, the first one you can hear if you follow the Governance and Legal page on LinkedIn, and there are other chats on there available as well.